Excuse me. Good afternoon to everyone. Um, it is now afternoon, formally at midday. I'd like to thank the members of the media for being here. I'd like to thank the leader of the opposition, who we've also seen here this morning, and I've invited him to stay. The bottom line is that I've asked a series of government officials to come here today because over the course of the last 24 hours or so, a number of allegations and a number of statements have been made. And in these matters, I have learned always to follow the facts and to follow the science. And it is for that, therefore, that I would like to defer to, first and foremost, the Minister of Health, whose responsibility it is to be able to detail what has been happening, and also to update us that up to last Thursday the Cabinet took a paper on this matter, and that this matter has engaged this government. The AG will speak to the actions taken legally since we have been the government, and we will continue to speak to all of the issues as we have been doing with the residents quietly and effectively over the course of the last few weeks. But this for us cannot and has not been a political football. But at this point, and that is why you will see me not even in my colours, and the candidate is not even here, because this is first and foremost being raised on the eve of an election. But the reality is that the circumstances related to this matter go way, way, way before anything to do with the St. George North by-election. So let us be very clear about that, and we will respond as the government as opposed to anything else here this morning. Minister?
Thank you and good afternoon to all. When I first learned about this matter, I carried out my own investigation to ascertain the facts. And part of that process was a site visit here, having heard some complaints from residents and also complaints coming from the then MP for the area. He would have spoken to me as well as the Attorney General about the particular difficulties that residents were facing here. That's about 2 years or so ago. I visited the site, and based on that visit, I was able to substantiate exactly what the residents were saying, and I too got a taste or smell of what they have been experiencing for a while. But the reality is that this matter has been ongoing since 2005. And as soon as I got wind of it, then I determined that something had to be done. And I visited here, I met with residents back in August, and also in December, I convened a meeting at the Ministry of Health and Wellness involving all of these stakeholders, including fire service, environment, all government agencies, the town and country planning, and so on, because they all had a vested interest in this particular issue, water authority as well. So that the matter, as I said, has been ongoing, and there was a legal aspect to it as well, and that was only resolved in April of last year when the magistrate at the District 8 Court gave instructions. So having then received the information, having seen for myself, I decided then that I would take a paper to Cabinet, which I did, with some recommendations. And let me say, at that time, we determined that it was not only this particular site that we were going to be dealing with, but all end-of-use quarries, waste disposal sites, because we felt that we needed to come up with some policy decisions to be able to deal with the situation. So the Cabinet paper was submitted, and Cabinet then instructed that an interministerial committee be formed, which I am the chair of, and that a technical committee comprising all stakeholders also be established to be able to advise the ministerial subcommittee. That process started. We also invited the residents to have some representatives on that committee, and I would also have invited the Pan American Health Organization to be part of the committee because I sought their assistance in getting the matter resolved, and they participated in that process. Cabinet paper was submitted, committees were established, and I know that the technical committee then started its work, and they would have had several meetings and several site visits between February and June of this year. And they would have made some determinations, and some recommendations did come to me as Minister of Health and Wellness and also as the chair of this interministerial subcommittee. And those recommendations, we examined them very closely, And then we produced another cabinet paper which outlined exactly the way forward in terms of the actions that had to be taken here. Regrettably, and not using this as an excuse, but it is the reality of the situation, COVID delayed the progress of things, and I apologize to residents for that, because some of the principal players, including Mr. Chapman, who is also the head of the COVID monitoring unit, and myself as the chair of the interministerial committee, we obviously could not give all of our time and efforts to this particular situation because of COVID. But we're back on track. The paper was submitted. We have a plan as to how we're going to deal with it. I reached out again to the Pan American Health Organization, and they have agreed to assist us with a specialist out of Washington, D.C. to deal with air pollution, for example, in the area, because that is a particular expertise that we felt that we needed to get, along with the equipment that is required, and also to give a level of transparency to the residents who obviously by this time would be frustrated because this has been going on for quite some time. So that is, generally speaking, what has been happening here. I myself had determined that I will speak to the residents, but did not want to do so until after the by-election, for the reason that, for me, this is a serious matter and we didn't want to play any politics with this, and I felt that I needed to speak to residents first to tell them what we're going to be doing going forward before actually speaking to the press on the matter. And that is where we are at this point in time. I now invite Mr. Chapman, who will then give you a more technical brief.
Right. Good afternoon. As the minister has said, we were dealing with this for a little while now. Now, what is the issues here at the site is the improper dumping of materials. Our challenges are many. Now, for the most part, a landfill is a very technical undertaking. Most people may pass by a landfill and see equipment moving around and things being dumped there. But a landfill is a very technical operation, and I just want to mention some of the issues that would be attributed to a landfill and what is not here but is causing us some problems. One is the lack of compaction. In landfills, you have to compact your all of the solids, and that compaction tends to squeeze all of the air out. Once that air is squeezed out, it then reduces your chances of spontaneous combustion because there's no air to fuel your fire. The other thing is that you have to ensure that your cells are constructed properly. So in a landfill, you put your stuff together and then you put some cover material on it, which is usually about a foot and a half of dirt after you've compacted. So that is called those are the smaller cells. Now here you don't have that. You just have all the stuff put together and then covered over as a whole. The other things for landfill is that you have your vent pipes. So you have because once you start your garbage starts to decompose, it produces methane and other gases called mercaptans, and a lot of those are highly flammable and they cause the spontaneous combustion. So there are a number of other issues that go on. Our main issue here, in terms of getting this problem solved, has to do with the rock face that you would see on both sides here, and that's contributing to the challenges. I'm going to let Ricky speak to the actual solutions that we've come up with to put in place. But I just want to say this, that it is not as simple as one would believe in terms of operating a landfill. And those technical issues, when not handled properly, will result in what we're having here now. And so what we have done is we have put together a number of strategies, which once we get them started, we will then be able to address the issue. And we anticipate that will be done in an agreement with the residents and so on, as soon as the residents are willing to continue. There may be there obviously will be some additional issues in remedying the problem, but I said let Ricky talk about those in terms of the remedies, and then we'll come right back.
Thanks, Ronald. Good afternoon, all. Ricardo Marshall. I'm the chair of the technical committee. We have decided to address the issue in three parts. One, looking at solid waste management. As Ronald has indicated, this is not an area that was prepared to receive waste, so it does not have a liner. It does not have the regular cap, and cells weren't prepared. So what we have proposed to do is to excavate along the north and the eastern wall that is behind me to about a depth of about 10 feet, and away from the wall another 15 to 20 feet. We're going to then do some compaction of what is under there, and we're going to put clay along the walls of the quarry so that you create that clay liner, which would prevent the movement of air and water into the cell. So you're trying to get that out of there. You will also then build up using topsoil and compacting that topsoil, come up in lifts, as we call them, or layers, up to the level that we're at right now. What we don't want to do is to disturb huge sections of the area where you've had settled waste, because when you do that, you're going to then get a lot more gases escaping at that point in time, and odors will then be difficult to control. In addition, what we are proposing to do is to do further compaction in the cell so that we can block some of the fissures that have been created. Excuse me, so that we can cut off that oxygen supply to the areas that are burning right now, so that we can get those put out, because there is subsurface combustion still going on. Secondly, in the area of water and water quality, we're putting a monitoring program in place to be able to understand whether or not there's any movement of material from here that could be a threat to the groundwater. So we have to put that monitoring program in place, and we will be doing that through a series of new boreholes as well as existing wells that can already be sampled. And the third component is one of air quality, which I believe the Prime Minister and Minister Bostic spoke to already in terms of assistance from PAHO, identifying what is there and giving us that information as we continue to monitor going forward. So I hope that that is a little bit clearer in terms of what it is we're proposing to do technically.
Good morning, members of the media. I am in a acute position because I am also an affected resident, but a person who is charged with the constitutional responsibility of protecting the legal interests of all Barbadians. This problem is not new. It has been here for the last 5 or so years. In fact, I was part of a group of concerned citizens that began the process of agitating, and we had numerous town hall meetings and other consultations. At this point, though, where we are today, I think it is evident, if you took a look, that the dumping that we complain so bitterly about has come to an end. But of course, the effect of that dumping is what is continuing to create the problem for us today. In my mind as Attorney General, there's absolutely no doubt that this is a public nuisance, and these matters have been drawn to the attention of the entity that has been doing the work here, the entity that was responsible for all the dumping. And we are at the point where I am preparing a remediation agreement, which will, and we've already had discussions on it, and that remediation agreement will provide the legal basis without having to go to court, because that is an option. But at this point in time, I don't think that there's any reason why we need to pursue a court action against the entity, in as much as he has, in fact, admitted the wrongdoing, and more importantly, has verbally agreed to take the steps that are required. So from my position as AG now, I have the responsibility of putting that legal framework in place. I expect to be able to do that within the very next week or two. And that framework will settle all of the required actions. Now, let me make it clear that we're not relying on the entity that created the problem to do any of the work. The fundamental principle about environmental impact is that it is the polluter who must pay. And the government of Barbados is adamant that the polluter in this instance has to carry every single bit of the cost of remediating this area, and those legal things are being put in place at this point in time.
Thank you.
Yeah, John?
Yeah. No. I want to be able to say simply that these matters obviously are of grave concern to the government. And to the extent that they have happened, the government, as I said before we were the government, and as I repeat today as the government, we will deal with it. And this has been a matter on which we have been unwavering. Mr. Chapman is the same person who heads up the COVID monitoring unit. Minister Bostic made it clear, where's Jeffrey?
Here, right here.
Right, that when COVID broke, there was a pause, first and foremost because of the lockdown, and thereafter because of the diversion of skills to the COVID monitoring unit to be able to allow this economy to be opened back up sector by sector by sector. I think many of you recall the anxiety of persons waiting for protocols. There's the protocol man here. There's the protocol man. But this is the same man who, along with Mr. Marshall, was also responsible for ensuring that nothing happened here. I heard that it was said that trucks are coming to dump in there. I invite the press to look and take the pictures down there. And to the extent that dumping has happened in the past is what we are holding Mr. Cherry and his company responsible for. But there is no evidence of any dumping at this point in time. And I'm told by Mr. Power, who owns the property, that you can't even get down inside to dump physically. So that this is a nonsense and a red herring released on the eve of a by-election. But what I want to deal with is the substantive remediation of what has happened here. And that is what the government has been dealing with for the last 18 months. We would not be asking the Pan American Health Organization to send an independent person to deal with this if we were not serious about being held to account, not just for the sake of the government, but for the benefit of the residents. If we were not serious about it, we would not have Mr. Craig, Dr. Mwanza, what's your name again, sir?
Alan Harvey.
Mr. Harvey, and others on the committee that has been dealing with this issue. So that this has been an inclusive approach from the very first day by the government. And to the extent that you had Mr. Marshall now outline what are the actions being taken with respect to the solid waste, with respect to water, with respect to air quality, is because our first responsibility is to the people of Barbados to keep them safe. And to the extent that this dump, and let's go back, Minister Bostic, and all of them will confirm, this dump was operating from 2015 to 2018. And the question must be asked, why was it allowed to operate for 3 years without the appropriate lining, without the appropriate permission, without all of the requisite things? And now all of a sudden people have found a voice? Well, that voice ignores the fact that there was a prosecution, ignores the fact that there is a multidisciplinary committee involving Environmental Protection Department, Barbados Water Authority, Barbados Fire Service, Town Planning, a whole host of government departments, and on top of that, the residents. No, this is the definition of open government and transparency. That it has happened is regrettable and wrong, but that it needs to be corrected is absolutely necessary. And the government has always said, I don't draw the hand, I don't play a hand that I can easily ignore. The reality is that this is the hand that was left to us by the Democratic Labour Party government, who for almost 3 years allowed this operation to go ahead without taking serious action, and now want to speak, and the AG tonight, and myself, because we will meet at Glebe tonight. I'm speaking here as Prime Minister. Today I'm speaking as Prime Minister. Tonight I'm going to speak as political leader of the Barbados Labour Party. And I can assure you that I'm not only going to deal with that issue, and believe you me, I want to deal with one other issue today. because the leader of the Democratic Labour Party also made allegations last night against this government for a hangar facility at the Grantley Adams Airport, accusing this government of entering a public-private partnership when Bajans were suffering, accusing this government of issuing a lease to Mr. Maloney at the airport for a private hangar. And on these matters, I simply say the facts are too easy. And the person who left the platform before she spoke was one Richard Seeley. Now, I am not going to bring out the red bag here today because I'm speaking as among a bunch of government officials. But I can assure you that tonight the red bag is going to come out, and I'm going to then make available to the country of Barbados the facts behind the allegation made by Verla de Pisa last night, and the fact that she could say that someone called her and gave her this information on the way to the airport and she didn't check it. Is that what a person who aspires to be Prime Minister of Barbados does? Is that how they treat the information? Let us be clear. She wants my job and Floyd wants Tony's job. And in both instances, I say categorically that neither are fit for the purpose of either job. Because if you were, you would have to explain how you could have been a member of a parliamentary party, a member of a Senate, and know full well that a lease was awarded by your government on the 1st of November 2016 to Mr. Maloney, and you now want to come and cast that as a lease issued by the government of Barbados under my leadership. I want us to recognize that in all things, and I started this press briefing by saying that we will be guided always by the facts and by the science. And whether it is on this matter of the dump or whether it is on the very simple issue of when a lease was signed and whether money was put into a hangar facility by the government of Barbados, the facts are too easy to verify for a leader of a political party to make wild allegations without checking the facts before they come. Can you imagine that if that person was in charge of Barbados now, what they would be doing with the lives and property of persons if they're going to act this callously with respect to facts? Cannot happen. And I say to you that the one thing that COVID has done for us, and I say it every day, I say it every week, that COVID has done for us a realism check, that this is serious times for serious people. And when you can make these allegations without taking the time to check them, and when you can come and offer to threaten to bring an injunction, Dale Marshall is going to deal with that tonight. What are you going to injunct against? Look and see. Mr. Craig, who is a resident, is the first one to tell me, but the trucks can't get down in there. So what are we saying? But this is what has caused a whole country to be put on pause because of the desperation 24 hours before a by-election. I want to say that our country knows better. And let me go back to the issue of the hangar too. If it is that the hangar was a bad project, we would have said so. But it is not a bad project because for every private plane that comes to Barbados, it engenders not only significant amounts of money in fees, but right now with COVID, that is how most people who want to travel are traveling because of their fear or anxiety with respect to commercial airlines. But if we start to make people feel that these things are political footballs and then do it on a platform that cannot be buttressed by facts, can only be buttressed by what I can call a tissue of lies and toxicity that ought not to be associated with a political campaign in the 21st century, in the third decade that we are in. We are making mock sport at people. And I hope and pray that we will be able to elevate our politics to a higher standard. Why haven't I brought out the red bag before? Because we've tried to be able to stay focused on the facts. But now that they want more facts, having described this as allegations against us, we will give them the real facts tonight and the paper. So come tonight and take the leases from me tonight and other things that I may have to offer to you. Okay? Are there any questions with respect to either matter? Very quickly.
Yes, Prime Minister. Just quickly, we heard a lot of technical terms on what is going to be done. Could you just translate that into what the time frame for relief for the residents?
I think that there's a question of them having to meet with the residents and working out what is an appropriate time for the residents to agree to what has to be done to start to remediate here. Because as you heard, you will have some consequences with remediation. And therefore, like everything else this government has done, we sit down and we talk with persons and we say, look, this is where we are, this is what has to be done, and this is the consequences of what has to be done. No government can make those decisions on its own without talking to the people who are affected. And to that extent, we expect, therefore, that meeting, you heard Jeffrey,
Sorry.
you heard Jeffrey make the point, the minister make the point, that he could have come in here 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, but we took a decision that we did not want to play politics with this issue, and therefore we would await the completion of the by-election before he had the town hall meeting with the residents to outline what Mr. Marshall and Mr. Chapman have literally told you today as a result of the multidisciplinary committee that has been put in place. Similarly, you've also heard the minister say that this committee was not simply about Lower Estate alone, and that when we asked PAHO to come in, it is to look at other difficult areas like Project Rock Hall, which you know we are now looking to move the persons because of the internal combustion on the dump there, bees recycling, and other things that have been going on that need to be put on a proper footing. And you know, when you inherit these things, as I keep saying, I can't do this. I can't twiddle my nose and say abracadabra. These things have a process and have to take time. Consulting Dr. Mwanza is here as a resident, but he's also the key man at the Water Authority. The AG is here as a resident, but he's also government's chief legal advisor. So that in all of these instances, look at all the different departments here. That alone speaks to the complexity of the matter. And when we want people to believe that you can simply twiggle your nose and that it's going to happen overnight, it doesn't work so, especially when what we inherited was almost 3 years of dumping. Okay? And if you talk to Mr. Power, he will tell you that there has been no dumping in here in recent times. You can't get down. Mr. Craig is the first body to show me that. So let the camera, a picture speaks 1,000 words, sorry. So you can take the pictures down there and see for yourself. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing many of you again tonight, because as I told you, today I spoke as Prime Minister with all of the government officials. But tonight I look forward to speaking to the people of St. George North as the political leader of the Barbados Labour Party, with a candidate who enjoys our full confidence and who is a serious woman for serious times. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.